It's a Jensen Interceptor Mark III, and I love it to death. I think it was aimed basically at somebody who wanted a car with style, for comfort, with speed. You put your foot down and you've got the boot. You can go. Simple as that. The engine's 7.2 litres, but I love the noise, the burble, and it's the twin exhausts, and it's just the whole thing. I just love being in my car. And people do tend to stop and look, especially because it's a woman driving. Gets up some fella's nose, which is quite nice. I was in a traffic jam and this gentleman was beside me, and I could feel these eyes burning holes in me, and I just turned and looked, and he went, so I said, thank you, and then he went, and I went. I pulled up a bit, and there he was again. This happened about 5 or 6 times, so in the end I wound the window down and I said, is it me or the car? And he said, both actually. It has been suggested that the large back window could be used as a greenhouse and you could grow tomatoes in a grow bag quite nicely. It's a great all-round view, you can see anything and everything, it's brilliant. The downside is the petrol consumption. It is, to say the least, excessive. I mean, I think on a really good run, if I'm doing a long run down the motorway, you can get 14 miles to the gallon. But around town, 10, 12, it's thirsty. Sometimes I actually feel as though I need a petrol tanker running alongside of me, just to keep it going. They have a habit, really, of overheating. I mean, I have actually overheated myself when I worked in London, and I blew up outside the office. All the hoses went, which wasn't funny. Clouds of smoke and steam everywhere. But it has now been cured, and we've got the vents in the top of the bonnet, which allow air circulation, and 2 huge fans in the front of the engine, behind the radiator grille, which switch in automatically. There is a book apparently that is concerned with recipes for cooking things like salmon, chops, fried eggs on the engine. Apparently a small salmon would take about 10 miles, 10 to 12 miles, and then you leave it to rest for 5 minutes, and then it's cooked.
The new Interceptor was introduced at the Earls Court Motor Show in 1966, but as well as the Interceptor, there was the Jensen FF, and this was the most innovative new car that any British manufacturer had put on show in many years.
The four-wheel drive concept came from Harry Ferguson, who designed the tractors. Jensen always looked for innovation. They wanted to be the first in any type of vehicle. They produced the first fiberglass vehicle, they produced the first car with standard seatbelts, and so they wanted to produce the FF as a first four-wheel drive production car on the road. A lot of people actually believe the car to be an Interceptor when they first see it. The FF is different. It has twin air intakes to the side, which is probably the most visually different part of the vehicle. The other part is that it's got an additional 5 inches in length. That enabled Jensen to fit the differential, the area which creates the four-wheel drive mechanism. The four-wheel drive meant that it actually became the safest car on the road of its era. You had 33% drive to the front wheels, 67% to the rear wheels, and with that it meant perfect road holding. You could go on a skid pan and you would not be able to skid, you wouldn't be able to wheel spin. So it's almost impossible to lose the car. For me, it started back 1967 with Dinky producing a model car that I actually found on the brick wall outside of my parents' house. Some child had obviously lost it, and it was a little yellow FF. From that day I decided that I was going to buy one, and so I had to wait about 30 years, but after that point I got it. When we bought this car in Wales, it was at an auction. It wasn't very much to look at the time, and we took it up to the car restorers. 2 days later we went up, and my heart really sort of fell through the floor, because I was told that what had I actually bought, it was a wreck, and the wings were fake. It just wasn't a Jensen as such, and I went away quite miserable. About 2 months later, when the car was actually finally stripped to bare metal, I got a phone call to say could I come up and have a look at it. When I went round the front of the car, they showed me the wings. There were no welds in them, and with big smiles they said, well, it's not fake, and it is actually Vignali panels, and you have got a car that's one of the very first 16. After that we did a bit more investigation to discover that it was actually the first production vehicle to be built in Italy, and it became something that was a bit special.
The FF model continued in fairly limited production up to 1971, but the Interceptor model went on to be the most successful Jensen ever. And then after the oil crisis of 1974, the Interceptor models, they got 10 or 12 miles to the gallon, were proving unpopular. And in 1976, that was it, Jensen were finished. The receivers were called in. Certain financial guarantees had been withdrawn, and the receivers tried unfruitfully to revive the company. Sadly, that was the end of the Jensen mark.
I actually feel that the government of the day could have stepped in and helped a little bit. It's a beautiful car, it's a hand-built car. It's a car with style, with panache, has so much going for it compared to the Euro jellies of today. When I look at that badge, the J badge, it stands for J for Jan and J for Jensen. I just get a shiver down my back. What girl could ask for anything more?
Barry White should have carried on walking when he noticed a 57 Chevy for sale while on a pre-breakfast stroll, because it turns out to be a job that will take up too much time and cost far too much money. Drastic measures will be needed to turn this wreck into riches next.